Hello, this is Paolo, and in this video I'm going to show you how we are going to create this scene from scratch using Reality 3 for Poser. The idea came from seeing this model in the HiveWire 3D catalog. This is one of their environments and I thought it was very interesting, but the original promo, here it is, didn't quite work for me, and I wanted to see if we could improve on the look using Reality, of course. So here it is how we're going to proceed. Let me go to Poser, and I'm not going to show you, how to pose all those little things, because that is not really part of what is related to Reality. By the way, those plants are from Lisa's Botanicals. Lisa's catalog, the entire catalog, and we're talking about an incredible number of plants, is also available at HiveWire 3D. We will see all the relevant parts about how to set up the materials and how to create the environment. So let's start, and I'm going to go here to the environment section. I actually have everything in an environments folder, and the building is a figure, so it will be found under the figures category of Poser. And here in the environments folder I have for all environments, in the second world folder there is the tropical villa Bora Bora, and so we are going to start by adding the building. So here it is. Let me move the library out of the way. And the first thing that we are noticing is that our camera really doesn't work for this setup. I'm in the main camera, and as we can see, the main camera is set at 75 millimeters. It's a telephoto lens, good for portraits, but not very good for landscape. So the first thing I want to do is to be able to frame all this complex in the right way. So let's click on the focal length for the camera, and I'm going to go all the way to a very wide angle lens. That is a 15 millimeter lens. And as we see, the model seems to be gone far away, but that is exactly the point of the wide angle lens. It gives us a wider perspective, and so we can look at the model in its entirety and see all the portions of the scene. It also gives us a more pronounced perspective. So here we are, pretty much, every setup is slightly different. And one thing I want to do immediately is to remove this. My default scene in Poser has a mesh light. We are not going to use the mesh light for this setup, so I'm going to delete it. And here it is, pretty much our frame as in the original image. Now, the first thing we want to remove is the ground. Now, the ground is important. We want to have it, but there is a problem with the standard ground plane provided by Poser, and that is that we cannot move it. And I really need to move it at a certain position. So I'm going to just hide it. The other thing I want to add is that pier that we see in the original scene. That is in the props. And again, I'll go to my environments folder. And here in the second world, we have these two possibilities, the stage land and the stage water. I don't know quite why this is called stage. Maybe it's a specific term for this kind of houses. The stage land is made for a configuration where we see the land. The scene that I configured instead was with the buildings standing in the middle of a body of water. So we're going to use the stage water prop. I'll add it. And from this point of view, it might not be clear exactly how it works, but if we rotate the scene, you'll see that actually this section connects the buildings. So if we were going to use a different point of view, a different frame, this would be pretty interesting. So the way it is now, it's adding to the interest of the scene, at least for me. All right. So here we are. Now the next step is to add the water and the sky. Now if we look at the package, again in the library, we see that there is a sky and sea dome prop, part of the set, and we could be tempted to use this, but that would be a bad idea, and let me show you why. By the way, these things generally don't work in reality and Lux. I mean, the sky domes and all the tricks that are used in Poser to create these environments rarely work because they're not designed to create a physics-based environment. So let me show you where is the problem. We add the sky and sea prop from the library. Let me move this window away. And here it is. It kind of looks okay. You might say, where is the problem? Let's switch to the wireframe mode and we can see exactly what we are facing. So let me switch to the other camera. And here you'll see that the sea is created using very large polygons. Now, if we look at our original scene, you see that I have ripples here, I have waves. Well, I want to be able to create these waves. Waves are created using displacement maps. If you're not familiar with displacement maps, let me just recap the topic and summarize how they work. A displacement map is an image that creates a displacement. Now, displacement is kind of a fancy word to say moving the geometry. So with a displacement map, I can move this geometry here of the sea. But now, if we look at the geometry, we see that it's made of very, very large polygons. When I move the vertices. I move the points here. So these points here, these points here. I cannot move the surface. The surface is solid. Now, consider this polygon here to be made out of cardboard, really thick cardboard. You know that you can bend the corners quite easily, but bending the inside doesn't happen very easily. You might just punch a hole in through that, but you don't bend it easily. The same thing is for geometry. If we want to bend the geometry, if we want to displace the geometry, we need to have very fine geometry. And this is very coarse. So this doesn't work at all. We could use subdivision, and that is absolutely a workable approach, but this is a rather complex environment. It's sky and sea together. It puts constraints that I don't want to have, and there are better solutions. So I'm gonna take this and delete it. Okay, and we are back to our environment. So the first thing I want to do is to add my water plane. The water plane that is available in Reality, because Reality comes with props and lights. They are designed specifically for this kind of tasks. So I'm going to go to the Props tab and navigate out of here. And I'll go into my Reality folder. And here I'll find the water plane. So let's add the water plane to the scene. Now, if I switch to wireframe mode, now you see that the water plane already has a much finer geometry, even at these sides. So this is better. And to make it work with this environment, I'm going to just scale it up so that it goes all the way to the horizon. As we do this, the squares become larger, but they're still very small. So this is a good environment. Now, the plane is too high. You see that it's hiding the steps and the landing, so we don't want that. So I'll take the water plane and just move it at a lower level. Okay. So pretty much like this works. And that is already a big improvement. Now we can work with this water plane. It's made to work in reality directly. We'll see how to set it up correctly. Now, the first thing we need to do though is to add another element to this scene. Let me switch to the auxiliary camera. And now we have our sea, but we don't have any bottom of the ocean. Now that would be unrealistic. So we need to add something to create the bottom of the sea, the seabed. Now we could go to our props here in Poser and use the Poser primitives, and that would be a good choice. So we have our primitives. If we scroll, we see we have two types of interesting primitives. We have the square and we have the square high res, and both are not very good for what we need to do. How can we go wrong with the square? Very easily. This square is not correctly UV mapped. And what that means is that if we needed to add a texture, the texture will not map correctly. So that automatically disqualifies the square. Now we could use the square high res, and that is in fact UV mapped correctly. The problem is that it is a high res square. It has a lot of polygons, which makes it perfectly good for deformation and displacement. But in this specific case, we don't need it. So whenever we create a scene, we want to be as economical as possible. We don't want to add geometry unless it is strictly necessary. And in this case, it's not necessary. So what can we do? In the same prop folder here, if we go to the reality folder, we have the simple plane. And I created this icon for the simple plane with the Vitruvian Man by Leonardo, exactly to show that this is one plane with one polygon only, but it is perfectly UV mapped. So if you apply a texture, it will work just fine. Now, in this case, specifically for this scene, we don't need to put any texture, but I wanted to highlight it just to make you aware of this solution and also of the pitfall of using the Poser primitive. So let's add this to our scene, and it seems that it didn't appear anywhere, but it is here. You have the simple plane. So let me just hide the rest of this, and here it is. Here is our plane. And well, we want to do a couple of things to it first. So first of all, we want to rotate it so it is positioned flat. So I'm going to just rotate it on the x-axis minus 90 degrees, and here it is. Okay. And then we will need to scale it. So let me turn on the visibility for everything again. And the problem is, where is the plane now? So let's move it closer to the bottom. simple plane. And I'm going to change the name of this. I'll call it seabed. Okay. And now we're going to just move it. And see if we can move it. I can see some movement there. So let's scale it larger. Okay, now we see it. Okay, it's happening. Good. So we can use this tool from Poser to move it at the right position in a more intuitive way. Good. Now you see, as I move the camera, because I have this large plane of the sea, this is kind of a hard thing to deal with. So we need to find a solution. Also, having two planes, both gray in color, really, it's not very useful. It makes it working with this pretty hard. So the position of the plane is pretty much accurate. It's good. But we want to change things a little bit to create our environment in an easier way. So I select the water plane and I'll go to the material room. Don't panic. We're going to do very, very simple variations here. I have my water plane selected. This is the material reality water, which is the only real material available. And I'm going to just change the diffuse color to something blue, water-like, so that we can tell the bottom plane apart from the sea plane. And I'm going to change the transparency to something around 0.5, so it is half transparent. And in fact, we can immediately see that the top of the building is visible through the plane. This is helping a lot. So let's go back to the pose tab, and now we have this situation, and we can see the bottom of the sea through the water plane. All right, so let's switch to the top camera and zoom out all the way, just that we can see the edges of our seaplane. So ideally, I want to have the seabed sides almost exactly as the water plane. So I'm going to select the seabed and then act on the scale parameter, which grows up a little bit, but very, very slowly. So let's go for something like 5,000%. Good. Well, let's try 10,000%. Too much. So we can go down to 8,000. Almost perfect. There you go. So now we have our environment set correctly. Okay, we have the bottom of the sea there. We can see the pylons sticking out a little bit. That is perfect. We have the top of the sea. Right, so this is our good situation, our good setup, and from this point on, we can add the sky. So to add the sky, the best option we have is to use the IBL feature in Reality. IBL stands for Image-Based Lighting, and through IBL, we can create an entire environment that gives us the sky, the background, and the lighting, if we have the right map, and we do have it. So let me just change the screen a little bit. We are going to go to Reality. And in this video, I'm using a new version of Reality that will be released soon. This version has a new look. As you can see, it blends perfectly well with Poser. And if it looks slightly different from your version, don't worry. It's just a matter of updating the program. At the moment I'm recording this, this new version of Reality is not out yet. You can switch the look of the application and go back to the native look using your OS at any time, but I'm going to use this. All right. So we want to create a sky for our scene, and by using IBL, we take advantage of the fact that lighting, image-based lighting, that's what IBL means, lighting comes from the map, and so we can use a very realistic lighting that will make our model appear as if it belongs to the original environment that was shot. So I'm gonna go to IBL, and I need to select the map. Now, I downloaded a map from hdrlabs.com. They have a lot of interesting IBL maps. These are smart IBL maps, and let me show you here. It's in the Smart IBL and the Smart IBL archive. And you are probably fairly familiar with these. 3 of these maps are already included with Reality, like the Alex apartment in Chiricahua Plaza, and also there is a park. Anyway, so these are at the top of our set, but there are many other maps that are available if we scroll down. And one that I found pretty interesting is here in the Dutch Skies 360 promo library. Now, Dutch skies really don't go with the tropical environment, but this one actually worked pretty well. So I used the Dutch Skies 360 free O2, and you just download it, and it's a pretty big set, has a lot of different files, a lot of stuff that is not necessary for this tutorial. But if we switch to the map, this is the package, how it is expanded from the zip file. If we look inside, there is a Sybil folder, and inside there is the DS360free002. Now, what we need is this file called .ibl. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to go to Reality, click on the Change button, navigate to where that map is, and select the .ibl file. As I do that, Reality automatically goes inside the IBL file. It finds what map is necessary for the lighting, and it reads that map and assigns it to this field. It also selects the gamma, sets the gamma to the right value. Now, if we switch back to Poser, we see our sky set correctly. Now, be mindful that this scene is now visible through a distant light I have here. This distant light is not used for rendering, but it's just used to see the scene. So if you have a different setup, you might not be able to see the sky. Adjust your lighting. Okay. So in this way, I'm able to see my background here. Now, one thing you can do with this sphere is to rotate your environment so that whatever part of the background that you want to see in the final render is positioned correctly. So this is pretty much where I had it for my original setup. Now you see that the water plane is not quite as large as I have in the original scene. That is just a matter of scaling it and scaling the seabed. So at this point, we have everything configured correctly. Now we need to take a look at the materials, and that is the subject of the next video.